We have a very poor understanding of business and a poor understanding of the tax burden we place on businesses. If you think about a manufacturer that produces any good that you want to think about, what is the net profit margin in manufacturing on average? It will vary, but you might talk about maybe 10%. Out of that, so that is the money for every $100 sold by a manufacturer, $10 goes to the owner. But out of that $100, how much has gone to the government? At least $18 goes to on VAT alone. Another portion goes to pay as you earn. Another portion goes to income tax. By the time you're done, a typical business is paying 30 to 40 or more % of their earnings to government. Even when there's no income tax to be paid, there's still a substantial contribution being made to the coffers. That is not appreciated and understood. And there's a view that businesses are always looking to cheat. That approach to administering taxes is a major constraint upon growth of trade, but it's also a constraint upon attracting investment into our region. The legal frameworks are a challenge. The traditional East African countries, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, had a common British Commonwealth or imperial heritage, therefore the legal systems are generally similar. However, once we bring on board DRC, Burundi, Rwanda, South Sudan, the legal systems change, and therefore that creates a constraint upon how we do business, how we understand the rules of the game. We've had issues around the respect for the rule of law. Again, the DPM alluded to that. We've had issues in Uganda, for example, where contract enforcement, borrowings have been challenged in court successfully, and it has taken superior courts, it has taken the court in the United Kingdom to overturn some of those decisions. Again, things that don't augur well for investments, attracting investments into our region. Rules and regulations, what passes for acceptability in one country may not be accepted in another country. Standards enforcement in one geography don't. Slide, talk a little bit about investment requirements and how can we unlock the potential of the economic bloc. Again, just a few ideas. We know that we're operating in an environment of very young populations across the region. More than 40% of our populations are under the age of 18 within the East African community. We also have increased life expectancy. That creates demands. If we're going to industrialize, we're going to need highly skilled workforces. Those require investments in education. Healthcare needs to improve. You can't work unless if you're not healthy. But we're not spending enough on education. We're not spending enough on healthcare. We've got a huge natural resources endowment. It requires a lot. The power of infrastructure is so significant, and the most recent example is Nairobi. Those of you that live in Nairobi, those of you that have visited Nairobi in the last year or so, will have seen the transformation by just doing a few roads around Nairobi. How easy it has made. So the trip to the airport and back from the airport used to take 2 hours easily. It is now 20 minutes from anywhere in the center of anywhere in Nairobi city to get to the airport. And not just that, but also areas out of Nairobi have also been made very accessible. Access to finance. In terms of the private sector, again, this has already been mentioned as an issue. Our capital markets are developing, but are still very poorly developed. From an Africa context, the total value of our stock markets in East Africa is 3.5% for Africa alone. And yet our population is within 20-25% of the total African population. We're clearly punching way below our weight. That creates a constraint on access to capital, and therefore investment and trade. High cost of funding, insufficient products, depth and breadth. Around March or April this year, there was a story coming out of the US that the corn crop, corn is maize, same as maize. The maize crop in the US was already seen to have was going to be much lower than expected. In some places by as much as half. And they knew that. And they knew that 3 or 4 months ahead of harvest. So much so that insurance companies are already moving in to start to evaluate the losses that need to be compensated under the crop insurance schemes. So much so that farmers already knew they no longer need to pay attention to those crops. And they must now be thinking about alternative ways of using that crop because it will not be suitable for human consumption. It will not be viable. So now being converted for animal feed and other bits and pieces. So the lack of development of our financial systems can be a significant constraint to trade. It makes it difficult for us to survive shocks and short-term disruptions. I've already mentioned the small size of our economies. I've also mentioned the insufficient development of our manufacturing capacity, which then means that how can we tap into whether or not we've got raw materials, whether or not we've got cheap labor, how can we tap into global value chains when we simply haven't demonstrated that capacity to manufacture to high standards? If you look at the EU, the largest portion of trade within the EU is manufactured items. The largest portion is around automotives, it's around cars and things of that nature. So there's a lot to be said in terms of us being able to build up that manufacturing capacity. Brief reflection on the next slide on what CEOs are most concerned about within East Africa. What are the key worries? So inflation is top of mind. Macroeconomic volatility, which is closely related to inflation, comes second, ranked second. And then you got risks around cyber, climate change, geopolitical conflict, health, and social inequality. We've done a family business survey, and that survey is interesting because if you compare the results for Uganda, East Africa, to the rest of the world, in many respects, they look fairly similar, surprisingly. Because, family businesses in South Africa, for example, include such major groups such as the Oppenheimer family and others. So we don't really have a comparison that is like for like. In places like Germany, there are some huge family business empires. But the results were fairly similar, except one statistic that really stands out. That's taxation and tax administration. And that, again, says quite a bit. My final slide is around recommendations. If you allow me, and I humbly request allow me to make some recommendations. On the next slide, please. One is harmonization of regulations and policies. We know the difficulty that we face due to the lack of harmonization of what is the standard that we should be following and how should that standard be enforced across the region. Number two is infrastructure development. Without access to good roads, rail, air transport, marine transport, you simply cannot do intra-regional trade. We've talked about the issue of there were no trucks lined up from Katuna to West Africa. Question is, where would you pass, right? There has been talk for years about network from Cape Town to Cairo. That has been talked about for more than certain, and they pelt each other with tomatoes for 2 hours. Tomatoes can be grown and harvested in Spain this morning and end up on a supermarket shelf in Scotland the next day because the road network exists. And there's a matter of getting them onto a truck and getting them across that distance. So that is such an important constraint that should we focus on. But part of it is infrastructure costs a lot of money and time, but bureaucracy doesn't. We can change that quickly. We can change that in an instant. PPPs, again, I think that requires little explanation. Legal frameworks around investor protection and promotion. We're doing a lot of investor promotion, but we're not investing enough in investor promotion. Our investment promotion agencies are not necessarily well funded, and as a result are struggling to attract investment with the level that we would like. Regional value chains, I've already spoken to that to an extent. The one point that I'd like to spend a bit more time in is around research and development. How much research and development are we doing within East Africa? We'd like to commend the East African community for setting up a research fund. And it would be nice to hear from them in terms of how well that has been tapped into and realized. Most of the research we do in our universities is done for Western companies. And it goes all the way back to those Western companies. So the lack of integration between our manufacturers and our research bodies is a significant constraint to us being able to innovate, improve our products, and improve the way that we do business. There are some examples of innovation. Again, we may have different views about some of them, but there have been some attempts, and I wanted to highlight the issue of Covidex. During the COVID pandemic, we were told that there's a cure in Madagascar. Then we were told there's a cure. Some gentleman showed up in Uganda with a heart. He said that the cure didn't quite happen. But the most effective treatment for COVID in Uganda was a herbal treatment developed in Uganda. And of course, at first we didn't believe in it. But I think it's to say that where the appropriate research is undertaken, it is possible for us to actually develop solutions to our problems. There is an example of equity that I would encourage you to look at. And I didn't do this because I was expecting Dr. James Mwangi to be on the panel. The question I was asking myself is, how much are we spending? So the top 5 companies in East Africa are Safaricom, Equity, Tanzania Breweries, KCB, and I forget the 5th one. And my question was, how much are they spending on R&D? And how do they do it? And how can we understand that R&D? And Equity Bank offers some very good examples because 20 years ago, it was a building society, serving less than 1 million customers. And today, it's a bank, it's a group, it's across the East African community, other than in Burundi, and serving millions of customers. It is now the most profitable bank in Kenya, and so on and so forth. Cost-income ratio is below 50%. For a bank with roots in microfinance, where normally the cost of service are high, how have they done that? Technology is a big part of that. Research into what products need to be developed, how they need to be developed, was undertaken, and that has informed their journey. And they have led in some respects for a regional bank, for an indigenous bank, quote unquote, as opposed to some of our equally innovative, more innovative banks, but which have a benefit of having a global presence. But the point here is to say it's not just the spend on R&D, it's the quality of that spend that will determine the future for our trade and investment within East Africa. I thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Uthman Mayanja. As you're sitting, probably allow me to ask you a question while my panelists are preparing themselves for their questions. If you look from, and because PwC has a global perspective, continental perspective, from the FDI perspective, from foreign direct investment, what do you think or you perceive to be the comparative advantage of this region?
Thank you very much. I think the first point we must remind ourselves is that international investors have got many options. The East African community is simply one of many regions in which their money can be invested. And it's also seen as a higher risk destination. And that is why every time we have a shock, either at the global level or within the regional level, we see an extraction of capital. So what are the things that make us attractive? One of them is our population dynamics. Our region has got a young population, well-educated, and in some cases multilingual as well. So that is a significant attraction, that you can get access to skills and get access to labor within the region. What they also look for quite often is policy consistency. Sometimes investors don't worry so much about whether or not the policies are great, but it's knowing whether the policies will be maintained. One of the things, however, when it comes to policies that has helped the region, has been around free movement of capital. And in fact, talking to some people are saying, is it too free? Is it too much? That, it doesn't matter how much money you bring in, how much money you make, you can take it all out in some of our countries without anybody asking questions. But the ability to bring money in and take it out when you need it is a significant advantage, and I think it's one that we can't afford not to have, simply because we're competing with so many other regions, Latin America, Central and Eastern Europe, Asia, and so on and so forth, continue to offer massive investment opportunities. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Uthman. My sister Annette. We have heard this morning and this afternoon that the region enjoys decent economic growth, averaging 5% or above. But that could be more. It's hampered by some factors, some challenges, whether it's infrastructure, whether it is low productivity in agriculture, etc. So as EAC, what are the strategic thinking that you have in place to navigate through those obstacles to ensure that the region grows even faster?
Thank you very much. And I also want to recognize and thank our keynote speaker for his presentation and the thoughts and recommendations that he has shared. I want to respond to a couple of the issues that he spoke to before I respond to your question. One specifically on customs, and customs as one of the key institutions for purposes of facilitating trade. I want to acknowledge a lot of work that has gone into modernization of customs processes and systems, and that we have moved a very, very long way from what the situation was a number of years ago. Many customs processes have been improved. We have connectivity of customs across the region. We have modern application of modern technology, for example, through regional cargo tracking systems. We have scanners at border points. We have officers from the different revenue authorities stationed at ports to ensure flow of goods. So I think as we continue to explore innovations for customs improvements, let's also recognize all the hard work that has gone into those improvements, and also we look forward to advise on what else we need to do in a very tangible way as we look at the systems that have been put in place. On NTBs, that's a really important matter that we continue to reflect on. There are systems in place to monitor removal of NTBs. In one of the discussions we had early this week, we were asked a very challenging question. Why do we even have an institutional framework for removal of NTBs? There shouldn't be NTBs at all. So we can't pride ourselves in having NTB removal committees. They shouldn't exist. And I think that's a matter we are going to be reflecting on. And together through this technical working group that was just launched, those are key issues that we want to focus on. On the question that you just posed on some of the strategic interventions, you will recall that the heads of state at one of their retreats prioritized a list of 200, mainly to bridge the infrastructure gap that you raised. And of these, at least 17 projects were identified as high priority, whose development is meant to be fast-tracked. And the council is deliberating continuously around these issues to make sure they are prioritized, to ensure that resources are made available to deliver these projects. Once delivered, the infrastructure challenge will be addressed in some ways. Of course, border posts have been improved. A number of major roads are under construction in the different partner states to lead to connectivity of the region. Infrastructure projects, as you mentioned, as the keynote speaker mentioned, are very expensive projects, and they take a long time to deliver. I think it's that commitment that resources that are needed are made available to move forward these projects. There's also the issue of agricultural productivity, and we all agree that the region depends very heavily on the agriculture sector, whose contribution is somewhere between 20 to 40%, depending on the country. And the challenges remain, but there are a number of strategic interventions that are being discussed and prepared at a regional level. For example, the Agriculture Input System Development Program, which aims to facilitate harmonization of agricultural inputs, policies, and regulations. There's also an intervention to mainstream the regional aflatoxin prevention and control strategy, allocating of funding to aflatoxin mitigation, a number of guidelines that have been developed. So there's really a lot that is in the pipeline. You will also be aware of the research. And I also want to bring to your attention the role of the Science and Technology Commission in ensuring that there's a research agenda that contributes to innovation, helps in identifying key research priorities for the region, and ensuring the availability of funding to deliver those priorities. I hope that's just a flavor of many other issues that we could talk about.
Thank you so much. I'll come back to you. Sanjay, my brother, maybe you can also start with your reflection on what Uthman has said in his presentation. And then you can also take us through your thoughts and ideas, especially because of your very strong background from financial sector, being the CEO of Standard, previously CEO in Tanzania. Uthman, corruption that has caused in service, etc. What do you think could be done to mitigate some of these challenges? So your own sector, what kind of mitigants can we think of to ensure economic stability of the region?
Good. I think whilst we had some bites, we are standing in between lunch, yeah? But I think Uthman has spiced up the conversation. I actually think we should have started the day with Uthman speaking so that our chief guest should have been listening to what Uthman said. Since John asked me about my reflections, I think many of you know that I am Tanzanian. It actually took me down memory lane. You know, about 40, 45 years ago, when I used to cross into Uganda, Kenya, I thought things were so much more easy. And then my father said, you know, there is this amazing East Africa cooperation that is coming up. And the big question was, so when East Africa cooperation comes in, what changes? And the whole idea was, it's going to be so much more easy. I can tell you, 40 years later, it is so much more hard. And I think Uthman brought a lot of clarity to that. Since you're talking about reflection, I also found it very challenging that as a leader and a very big private sector advocate, I think the whole game of collaboration needs to change. When we talk about making sure trade, investment, collaboration, cooperation, all those things work. And three things came to mind. I think number one is Uthman brought a very significant clarity to all of us. He said business. We don't really understand business. Everybody who stops business should be punished. You know, we need to first make sure if you don't understand business, you should not be doing that job. You know, maybe we should change our job descriptions to say that everybody who is recruited, you know, needs to have the test of business, you know, which is very critical. I think the other thing is that everybody who is involved in trade and investment needs to change the definition of the border. Why is the border Kenya? And why is the border Tanzania? And why is the border Uganda? For everybody in the job who is trying to facilitate trade and investment within our region, the standard border for them should be East Africa. Then they stop the bureaucracy. You know? Why are we talking about European business models and Asian business models? Because they embrace that as the border. Surely nobody else should be talking about any other borders. Everybody else should be unlocking those borders. And I think maybe we all need to have a crash course on how to tackle bureaucracy. Because as Uthman said, that is free. You know, so it's very, very free. So I hope that in the next couple of days, we are going to bring more clarity to that. So sorry, John, it took me into very deep thinking, but it also took me into thinking that maybe we have some of our fundamentals wrong. Now, your question about foreign currency. I think, you know, clearly, we all are going through a very difficult phase in history when it comes to foreign currency, particularly in our region. But it is good to recognize that the issues we face in East Africa are not homogeneous. That means they're not the same, and they're not to the same magnitude. You know, the issues we face in Kenya are very different to the shortages we face in Tanzania. And frankly, we don't have shortages in Uganda, you know, because it's an open market model. Now, I'm not saying one model is different or better to the other model. I think what is critical is, one, we have a perennial business model which is very focused on living on imports, so it's never too sustainable. We have all this bureaucracy and challenges, and we have a lot of trade barriers when it comes to exports, so that balance has been an issue. We've only focused on commodities. We're all commodity-led markets. We've never diversified. I think Uthman talked about how do we create competitive industrialization. And if we think industrialization is best or manufacturing is best to be done in Kenya, then we should all put efforts and make that to be the manufacturing hub. And maybe Uganda becomes the agriculture hub, because you can grow anything here. And maybe Rwanda becomes the technology hub. If we start thinking about borders that way, there are different ways of doing business. But I think that I'm trying to highlight that with the models we have, which are historic, our issue about resilience is always going to be questioned or challenged. We're also not making human resources, a big part of investment. If you look at Singapore, India, some of the European countries, really human resources is the biggest flow of money. And then we have all these immigration laws, which doesn't recognize diaspora. So when you don't recognize diaspora well, to bring in financing into your own country's FDIs. So there are some perennial issues that we need to really focus on. But bringing it to the reality around why is a few countries in East Africa constrained? I think the reality is COVID. Many of our markets are very driven by tourism as a very key aspect of doing business, and that struggled. We also struggled in exports. The whole supply chain was a big issue. And when an investor finds an alternate source, when supply chain is disrupted, then they stick to an alternate source which is more efficient. And remember, that is the time when many markets understand business so that they make good decisions very quick. Whilst we are thinking about the supply chain, they are thinking about business. So there's a big difference there. I think the third thing is really that with the way the world is at the moment, with high inflation, interest rates growing, our outflows by nature, given that we are a debt market, as Asif spoke in the morning that we need to look at debt, our debt continues to grow, whether you like it or not. With every 0.25% increase in the world, our outflows grow. And I think we need to have that clarity of that outflow and how can we have the inflow. The other thing is really around, we are not prepared for risk. We many times are blessed, by the way, we're blessed by great weather, great natural environment. So I think we count our blessings on everything. We've got to become better with risk management. Othman spoke something very amazing about, the shortage of, is it maize in some part of America, and how they were planning like months ahead. I mean, what we are facing now, we were always going to face. Did we really plan? Are we really effective now? So risk management needs to change. And I think the whole discussion of why East Africa should be an investment destination is $1 million question for all of us. I mean, if we had to all invest a little bit more, I know as Standard Chartered Bank why I will invest and in which areas, but I still find a lot of questions. It is a very hard sell for me being in Uganda for 111 years to still sell Uganda. So then what's the problem? So I think what I'm saying is that, there are many ways through which we can start mitigating. We need to think about this as a long-term problem. So what do we say? We need to grow exports. We need to make sure that we look at all our imports and say, what can be locally produced? And again, I want to say locally means the bigger border of East Africa, not your own country. We also need to improve trade facilitation, bureaucracy, many things. And I know my sister here said, let's recognize. So I'm recognizing that the platforms we have created and the structures we have created can only be effective if the mindset is created. And I think that's the bigger block that we need to solve. We cannot forget that there is the whole thing about, if I was a head of East Africa, I would say, why do you buy anything from outside East Africa? That should be the big question. Anything that you import from somewhere else should be a big question for all of us. So how do we make the most out of East Africa? I think the other thing is I touched on human capital. East Africa has the best youth population that the world has. How do we optimize on that? A lot of countries are looking for shared services models. The accountancy, RSM, etc. will tell you. You can actually create amazing shared services. We speak English and really make this the spot where through cheaper labor, we can get more foreign currency. I think finally is roadshows. My brother Uthman spoke about, we don't even know how to control our narrative. You know, the whole world controls our narrative. Uganda like this, Kenya like this, Tanzania like this, East Africa like this. How do we become bold in controlling our narrative? How do we sell East Africa? If there are hundreds of us here today and we asked all of us, tell me 5 things about East Africa, we'll all have different answers. Why? Our PR is lacking ambition. You know, we've got to get to a commonness ground. And I think finally there is this thing called sovereign rating. If you look at all the markets, I think some are there a little bit stable, but most of us are showing very negative trends. Now, to an investor who is looking at the world where there is investment opportunity, these things matter. So how are you tackling that sovereign challenge where you are, you're categorized as negative? You know, we have the gray listing issues, we've got to tackle them. But I think foreign currency requires many things to be looked at so that they can be solved. So John, a big answer to my reflections on foreign currency. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sanjay. Thanks a lot. Now, allow me to invite 2 or 3 comments. The director of ceremonies has already alerted me that there's a next panel coming. But if 1 or 2 participants have something that they would like to contribute to a quick question, and again, my plea, it has to be brief, not more than a minute of a question or a comment. I'm not sure if we have microphones that can move around. People at the back helping us with audios. Do we have wireless microphones? Nobody's even shaking.
And John, whilst we are getting the microphone, I also forgot, since we have all the bosses of East Africa here, can we make sure that the trade in East Africa is settled in local currency within East Africa?
Perfect.
You know, why do we need dollars? Yeah.
Microphones, please. First, a lady over here, another lady over there, and then a gentleman and a lady. And then, so just, yeah. She's already standing, just, and then another microphone over there. First, young lady. Yes, Karibu.
Okay, may I start by thanking God so much. Thank you so much, the organizers, all protocols observed. It is unfortunate our minister has gone, but all of you here, you can hear me very well and do something. May I start with the challenges? I've been attending all the East African high-level summits in East Africa. I'm so grateful to those who have tried to solve some of the problems, challenges we have, but we still have a road. The first one I want us to like ourselves. Somebody commented that the Europeans develop very fast, but Africans, we hate ourselves. I will not be surprised if this dinner cocktail has no African product. I have the best wine in the whole world. I didn't get any.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll drink your wine. Thank you so much, lady.
Thank you so much. Also, now another thing, very briefly, taxes. To know that we hate ourselves, I have tried to develop East Africa, but I've been levied a lot of taxes to bring me down. I get a profit on this bottle, the lovely bottles you have seen outside are 500, they want 6,000 every bottle. I have tried to share my 500 with them. Now it is a tune of 1 billion they want me to pay. Soon they're coming to close.
So tax issue.
I'm so glad that the ED solved the problem in Rwanda where I opened the company. I wanted to start manufacturing. Problems came in, COVID came in. I found a lot of taxes. But thanks to ED is solving that. Taxes where I had never done any business. The border was closed. How could I file when I'm in Uganda and it is in Rwanda?
Point is noted. Thank you so much.
Emil, stop there for a while. Then
yes, thank you. I'm inviting another participant. Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Brigitte Harrington with the Jury Coffee Company.
I'll be a bit unkind with time. Okay, please go ahead.
I'm Brigitte Harrington with the Jury Coffee Company. And there were a couple things, and I think one of the first things that we have to take into consideration is changing the narrative. And I think I heard that stated earlier. When we talk about sending products from one country to another country, it's okay. I spoke with a young lady earlier about the products she's selling here, which are fine for this market. But when you start talking about crossing the border to go into another market, then it's imperative that a couple of things happen. What's on the shelves from Europe, from America, from Canada are on the shelves, and we have to compete with that. And so it's imperative that we change the narrative around the indigenous products that are being made. And in changing the narrative, we also need to make sure that our products are meeting international standards and that they are of the same quality or superior quality, to include the packaging and the labeling. So those are two things. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is uniform regulations. Uniform regulations in terms of your standards authorities. So as you'll all find out later, I exported coffee from Rwanda to Ghana under the Guided Trade Initiative. I had the coffee certified in Ghana because I knew that's where I was sending it. Then when I got back to Rwanda, I got a call from Rwanda Standards Board that said, well, you have not had your coffee certified here. And so I said, well, it's been certified where I was exporting it to. And they said, oh, but you have to have it certified here. I said, okay, well, let me bring all of the paperwork from Ghana, and I'll bring it to you, and then you should be able to issue certification in Rwanda. So I brought all of the paperwork from Ghana Standards Authority, from Food and Drug Authority in Ghana, and they said, oh no, we have to retest everything. And by the way, it costs more in Rwanda to test than it does in Ghana. So I'm as we say in Ghana, I'm begging, oh, please, get these people on the same page in terms of certification, because I should not have to pay to have the product certified in one country inside of AFCFTA and then turn around and have it certified in each country that I send product to.
Mutual recognition. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Chair, does that mean?
Thank you, Chair.
Does that mean that the taste buds of the Ghanaians are different from the Rwandans?
Yes.
And the testing must be in tandem with the different tests of the different versions of black people, right?
The Commissioner for Customs from Rwanda is looking at you like, where are you going with this?
No, I just want to understand this.
So if
Thank you,
MC now is
Chair.
done, please, not more than a minute.
No
Welcome,
problem.
Madam.
My name is Victoria Sektoreko, and I'm from the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda. I want to thank all the presenters, but specifically I want to thank Mr. Sanje, because you are the one who specifically mentioned the youth. Coming from a region where 70% of your people are youth, we sit here and we somehow forget that they are there. You all put emphasis on infrastructure, and you gave examples, the roads, the ports, the airports, and all that. What part of that does the youth use? Recently, I'll be specific. Recently, we had a concert here organized by Uganda. Boys to Men from the US came here with South Souls from Kenya. Finding a venue to perform was a nightmare, because Boys to Men wanted to perform inside. Uganda does not have that type of infrastructure. Then after that, we had Afrigo and Awilo Lagomba from DRC. I was there. When Lagomba came to the stage, everybody stood up. I was like, what is happening here? There's the Lagomba. I'm like, but eventually when he had the moment to talk, he was complaining about how difficult it is to come and make us happy. Now, East Africa, you have got these youths. They are an asset. When we have these important meetings, can we make them important? That is one. Two, what areas are they? The youths are in innovation, creative, and entertainment. But do you know that it is so difficult? I remember one time there is a singer from Tanzania called Platinum. Apparently when he was coming, finding space for him was such a problem. Then they started bringing in spousal affairs and all that. This was business. So while we are all older, the children are asking, where can they play?
Thank you. That is well noted. Unfortunately, I will have to take I see you, my sister Jen, but I'll only have to invite this young man from here. Otherwise, the MC will not be happy with me.
Thank you very much. My name is Joseph Michael from the U.S., and I'm a movie producer here in Uganda, new here in Uganda. And I have just a very specific question, especially with what this woman said. Sorry, I don't know your name, and her here with the changing the narrative. Movie production is extremely important everywhere. We all know that the U.S., when you want somebody to save you, Superman comes out of nowhere.
Absolutely.
Who saves our Ugandan children? What is the image that we put? And how can all of the investors in this room assure that movie production is a big part of the future of Uganda? Sanji, you said that if you were the leader of East Africa, how would you make movie production a part of East Africa?
Excellent, excellent question. Yeah, there are like 10 hands in the room, but unfortunately I will not take any. I'm sorry. I want to give my panelists an opportunity for final thoughts, but probably I will pose a question to also add into your final thoughts. Uthman, PwC is very good at doing budget analysis every time after budget speeches. If you look at the recent budget estimates from the region, they show we are still significantly depending on significant share of foreign external sources of financing. What fundamental changes do you think the governments or the region can do to increase ability to self-sustain in terms of financing our budgets? But you can respond to that, plus any final thoughts.
Thank you very much. Two quick ones. One is to be less wasteful in public expenditure in terms of the cost of public administration, which has gone crazy. The second thing is stop being wasteful when doing capital projects, which we lose a lot of value because a project can take up to 10 years to get off the ground. The second aspect of that is to broaden the tax base. Our tax authorities in some cases have been guilty of trying to go back to the same taxpayer for more and more and more. And in an environment of international investment, that simply doesn't fly. We have some proposals that are quite frankly not sustainable. We already have extremely high, and we simply cannot promote saving and investment. By the way, we talk about investment, and we look, a lot of people come from outside to invest. But we have a significant level of local investment, which we can't even measure. But that's already coming out of taxed income. So broadening the tax base is also critical. Thank you. In terms of general thoughts, in terms of the session, I think, I like the thought around involving the youth in this dialogue. The biggest question for me for the East African community is, when do we get that bite? If the EU passes a law or regulation, you can never break it without serious consequences. What is stopping us from getting that bite so that the East African community can actually be effective within the current set of rules and regulations and laws that we have? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Was it Fiona who said earlier in the morning, probably should use litigation as an approach to enforce implementation of some of those? Sanjay, your reflections, but specifically, what do you think could be the role of financial sector, banking and other financial services in shaping trade and investment in the region? Are there some probably innovations in financial service delivery that can help increase the level of trade and investment within East Africa, but between East Africa and the rest of the continent?
I like this because when John was in Trademark, he was the main guy who was talking to us about, what do you think in trade is very part of our ecosystem. There is the traditional products that we provide around financing, which is loans, and then a lot of trade financing. But what is critical now is the role of the financial institutions in providing information. I think there are many organizations like ourselves, Standard Chartered, that can really optimize on the network. So we have a big strategy called lifting participation, and we want to take 500,000 businesses, largely from Africa, to become part of the global world. We say resetting globalization. In the past, global businesses used to come here, but now we as bankers want to take them out, which is critical. I think the third thing is voicing where the costs of trade is becoming big. That's why I said, if we can settle transactions within East Africa, you don't use the route of MasterCard, Visa card, SWIFT, which sometimes can cost us 12 to 17%, and we can settle small transactions here. The last thing is a couple of other things. One is the optimizing on the African monetary management. There's an East Africa Monetary Council. There's also the East Africa Development Bank. Afri-Exim is here. There's Africa Development Bank. So how do we build Africa for Africa using financial institutions which are better at risk management? So how do we create that protocol? And I think finally is aligning to, I don't want to say national priorities, but regional priorities, so East African priorities. My last final thoughts, I think today's session is about private sector. And when it's about private sector, you walk the talk. Every day it's about walking the talk. You have very strong KPIs, you have to deliver. So I hope everybody has KPIs. The second thing is it's business. If you don't know it, don't be in the game. I said this before. And I think lastly, it's about everybody should demand the return on investment one is creating. And I think the simple formula is whatever you're being paid, if every year you're not generating 20x of this, then you still have to learn. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sanjay. Thanks a lot. Annette, your final thoughts, but as EAC, we are very proud of the fact that our region is one of the most integrated regions in the continent. Now, with the advent of AFCFTA, how do you envision the region to position itself to be able to harness this very transformative opportunity to increase the level of intra-Africa trade?
Thank you. I think the first issue is around harmonization. Harmonization, and it was mentioned by the keynote speaker, harmonization of trade policies to ensure that across the region, the policies are similar and implemented in the same way. This process has already started, and the region has adopted an implementation strategy. I think the most important aspect is how that strategy is being implemented or will be implemented on particular aspects such as standards, and we just heard from the lady express some of the challenges that she experienced. A fundamental point, which I think links to some of the issues that we've heard from the floor, is on sensitization and capacity building. I think we need to lift the AFCTA off the page so that our youth, our small businesses, cross-border traders, everyone understands what is these protocols. Many of the campaigns that we've had on sensitization have been very technical to try and interpret the articles of the protocol, but we are not being practical. Bringing sectors together of potential, discussing important questions around what are the issues that impede them from accessing that market, and devising solutions to address those challenges, and hand-holding, moving along with them to ensure that we can assess whether they are entering the markets or they are not entering the markets, and what do we need to do, what kind of regional policies are required. I think that's going to be very, very, very important. And we are looking at our capacity building programs, our sensitization programs, to ensure that they are tackling the right issues that the different stakeholders need to hear about. Promotion of micro, small, and medium enterprises. We have a strategy for micro, small, and medium enterprises. They constitute the majority of businesses, and we must give them the opportunity to also engage through, for example, the Simplified Trade Initiative that's already in place, disseminate information, share it with them, help them understand where the opportunity lies. Many of us here in the room probably have this information, understand it well, but if we cross the door and ask the person out there what is FCTA, and I doubt that we have many people that will give us a response. that we want to hear. So sensitization, capacity building, bringing on these sectors that we just had. And also I think we need to start thinking outside the box. Somebody said to me, you don't need a box actually, you should think with no box at all. But we need to start bringing on board these sectors that we haven't thought about. The movie production that we just had about, to what extent do we have these sectors featuring within the strategies that we are developing for the region, and what plans have we put in place for those sectors beyond developing the strategies. So I think with those few words, we are committed as a Secretariat to continue coordination of our agencies, to continue coordination of partners within the respective countries so that we can tackle all these challenges. And we're taking notes as the discussions progress.
Thank you so much, Annette. To the question from the young man, I'm from Tanzania, and the last government statistics show for last financial year, the fastest growing sector was not mining, was not telco, was not financial services. It was actually arts and entertainment, which is occupied by the young people for what is famously known as bongo movie and music. So yes, I think this is something that we probably need not to ignore. We need to think of arts and entertainment as a sector that needs sometimes low capital. It depends a lot on young people's brain. So it's something that we need to continue conversation. Colleagues, we could go on and on, but I think this was like a good discussion just to interrogate and start the conversation that is going to continue over the next two days. It was a pleasure having all of you, and thank you for being very attentive audience.
Thank you.
It tells of a change of
Welcome to the East African Business and Investment Summit 2023 here in Uganda, in the Pearl of Africa. During this forum, you will unveil robust opportunities, enable trade boosting, establish networks and connections enabling you to tap into East Africa projects, and gain a deep understanding of the African continental free trade area, all in the while forge lasting partnerships. We are keen on opening doors for you to tap into East Africa's vast investment potential under the theme Private Sector-Driven Regional Integration for Increased Intra-African Trade and Investment. Key highlights include trade and investment climate, positioning the African sector to take advantage of the African continental free trade area, unlocking digital business opportunities in the region, tax regime harmonization, highlighting the benefits and practical way forward, discussing access to investment for innovation and economic growth for startups, SMEs, women and youth in business, climate change and agriculture, industrialization and value chains in Africa. This is more than an event. It is a platform where business and investment dreams come to life. EABC is thankful to our major partners, Afrexim Bank, GIZ, RSM, Madivani Group, and all other partners.
from any other government institution within a period of 7 days, and the Tanzania Investment Center must get a response or a reply from that respective institution. If after a period of 7 days, if the response or a reply has not been sent to the investment center, then the requested approval or license is deemed granted. So we used to have 14 days, now it's only 7 days. The other important feature is the reinstatement of expansion and rehabilitation projects. So when you establish your investment project in Tanzania, and if you want to expand, or if you acquire a new investment project in Tanzania, and you want to rehabilitate the existing investment, then that kind of investment is also acceptable, and it can be registered by the investment center, and it will be able to access the incentives given. Lastly, I know that we are almost approaching the lunchtime. Lastly, I would like to inform you that we are in the process of completing the final procedures to shift from the physical one-stop center to the online one-stop center. So this is a platform which is called the Tanzania Electronic Investment Window, whereby all stationed institutions found under the one-stop center, their systems are integrated through the Tanzania Electronic Investment Window. Now, an investor who wants to apply, let's say, for company registration or business license or work permit or residence permit, he will only simply access the platform and be able to obtain all other services available under the one-stop center. So let me stop here and to give room for my colleagues to continue. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Apologies. As a hostess, sometimes there are things we have to fix. I'm very sorry for being late. Now we're going to have Mr. Dides Ngendakumana, the Chief Executive Officer of Burundi Development Agency, to tell us about investment opportunities that are available in Burundi. Okay, I think he's giving him a big hand clap as he collects his presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Didas Ngendakumana. I'm CEO of Burundi Development Agency. I thank you for this opportunity I have to talk to you about business and investment opportunities in Burundi. Our agency has, of course, a vision and mission to fulfill its duties in order to assist and support investors. We are in charge of investment and export promotion. We are also in charge of doing reforms to improve business climate in Burundi. We provide support and assistance to exporters, investors, and also we alert the government on cases of violations of laws and regulations related to business and investment activities. We have a dark past in Burundi. That's why now the government embarked on a program of economic recovery. We have visions 2027, 2024, 2060, and are the broader framework to which our policies are aligned. For the purpose of fast investment tracking, FDI is one of the core missions of our agency. And to ensure full commitment and prompt implementation of investment and export policies, our agency has been placed under the umbrella of the Office of the President. We have a new investment code which is considered as modern to attract and facilitate more investors. Investors are well protected in Burundi, as our investment code is clear on that. No nationalization or expropriation of investment on Burundi territory, except in exceptional cases of public interest. A fair compensation in case of expropriation is also clear in our investment code. Burundi signed different conventions, international, regional, related to investors' protection. Why invest in Burundi? Main reasons are there. Let me talk on some main reasons for why investing in Burundi. Because of the past I've mentioned, the country is still virgin. Country is still virgin. And we have a legendary hospitality of Burundians. They are like Ugandans. They told me that Ugandans are smiling every time. It means that Burundians are like Ugandans. The country has also attractive incentives, fiscal and customs benefits are guaranteed by investment code. We have also untapped investment opportunities with no fast competition. Unique attractiveness on Lake Tanganyika, which is the main city among other cities on the lake. We have also breathtaking landscape for tourists, cultural heritage. You know that Burundi is connecting the region, East African region communities to Zambia through Lake Tanganyika. This is facilitating business between these regional communities to SADC and also Central African communities through DRC. Some investment opportunities according to sectors are, first of all, focused on production sector, like agriculture, livestock and fisheries, which are contributing now around 40% of our GDP. Mining sector. In infrastructure, we have a deficit in energy of 50, 60 megawatt in the following 5 years. Means that we have opportunities for those investors interested in energy sector. Transport, ICT, warehouse, cooling depot at Bujumbura International Airport. In agriculture, we need more agro-mechanization in food processing. In mining sector, we need more exploration and exploitation of various minerals such as nickel, rare earth, phosphate, vanadium, carbonatite, kaolin, gold, and many more. Burundi has 60% of world reserves of nickel with 180 million tons estimated. Research on uranium is underway. I have some figures on reserves in mineral sector, like lateritic with incentives provided are like exemption of charges on property transfer, no import duties on raw materials, capital goods, and specialized vehicles. Corporate tax are reduced from 5 to 25% in the first 5 years. VAT exemption on local purchased, local material and equipment, and free repatriation of profit after payment of tax. We provide assistance to obtain licenses also to investors. We have a department in charge of that for all investors. Visas are free for those companies that need staff from abroad. They get a free visa to stay in Burundi and work permit. We assist businessmen and every entrepreneurs in business registration. It's done online actually. And we provide all required information on local suppliers and customers. We have other free operational one-stop shops. One is business registration. Apart that, we have other 3 one-stop shops like construction permit, property transfer, and connecting to electricity. With government policy